I thought getting laid off was rock bottom until my landlord said my sister slipped him $1,000 to kick me out early by nightfall. I was sleeping in my car behind a 24-hour grocery store, watching my family plan a getaway in a house they did not legally own. They were not asking if I was safe. That $1,000 was about to turn into the most expensive mistake my sister ever made. My name is Reagan Bennett, and until 48 hours ago, I was a functioning member of society. I had a job title that sounded important on LinkedIn, a rented apartment in a decent part of Atlanta where the sirens were merely background noise rather than immediate threats, and a belief that if I fell, there would be a net. I was wrong about the job. I was wrong about the apartment. And I was catastrophically wrong about the net. The collapse started on a Tuesday morning at Lumendesk Systems. I was a customer success specialist, which is corporate speak for a human punching bag who apologizes for software glitches I did not cause. I had been there for 3 years. I showed up early. I stayed late. I absorbed the panic of clients when the servers went down. I thought that bought me safety. It did not. My manager, a man named David who refused to make eye contact, sat me down in a glass-walled conference room and told me my position was being eliminated due to restructuring. He slid a folder across the table. It contained a generic letter and information about COBRA insurance that I could not afford. There was no severance package. There was just a security guard waiting by my cubicle to ensure I did not steal any proprietary staplers. I walked out into the oppressive Georgia humidity carrying a single cardboard box containing a succulent I had barely kept alive and a framed photo of a dog I did not own anymore. The heat pressed down on me, heavy and wet, instantly sticking my blouse to my back. I sat in my Honda Civic, which was 10 years old and made a rattling sound whenever I went over 60 miles per hour. And I just breathed. I told myself this was fine. I told myself I was 30 years old, smart and resilient. This was just a hiccup, a plot twist. I had 2 weeks of rent money in my savings account if I ate nothing but ramen and canceled every subscription I owned. I could fix this, but fear has a way of making you reach for things you know are sharp. I picked up my phone and called my mother. I did not expect a bailout. I knew my parents were not wealthy in the way that meant wires of cash. But they were comfortable. They spent their time between their primary home and various vacation spots, projecting an image of leisure. I just needed a place to crash. A month, maybe 2, just until I found a new support role. My mother answered on the 3rd ring. I could hear the sound of seagulls in the background. They were at the beach. I explained the situation. I kept my voice steady, trying not to sound like the desperate child I felt like. I told her about Lumendesk. I told her about the rent being due in 5 days. I asked if I could come stay in my old room. There was a pause, long enough for me to hear the ice clinking in her glass. "Reagan," she said, her voice dropping into that disappointed register she had perfected during my teenage years. "You are 30 years old. Your father and I have discussed this. We are done raising you. If you come back home every time the world gets hard, you will never learn to stand on your own 2 feet. I gripped the steering wheel. "Mom, I just lost my job. I'm not asking for money. I just need a roof. Figure it out," she said. "It is time to grow up." She hung up before I could say goodbye. That stung, but it was a familiar sting. My family operated on a philosophy of sink or swim. Although they usually only applied that philosophy to me, I drove home, unpacked my sad little box, and started applying for jobs. I felt hollow. But I was not defeated. I still had my apartment. I had a roof. I had time. 2 days later, the knock came. It was Mr. Henderson. He was my landlord, a man in his 60s who usually wore suspenders and talked at length about his hydrangeas. He was a decent landlord, the kind who fixed leaks within 24 hours and waived the late fee the one time my bank transfer got stuck. When I opened the door, he would not look me in the eye. He was staring at his shoes, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Ms. Bennett," he said. "Mr. Henderson." "Is everything okay?" I asked. I was wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, deep in the middle of rewriting my resume for the 50th time. He sighed and reached into his back pocket. He pulled out an envelope. It was thick. "I am afraid I need the apartment back," he said, effective immediately. My stomach dropped. "Mr. Henderson, my lease runs for another 4 months. You can't just— We are on a month-to-month holdover." "Remember," he interrupted, his voice tight. "The lease expired in May. We never signed the renewal." He was right. We had discussed it, agreed to keep the same rate, but we had never put ink to paper. I had been busy at work. He had been busy with his grandkids. It was a loophole I never thought he would use. But why, I asked, panic rising in my throat. "I have never missed a payment. I can pay you for this month right now." He finally looked up. There was pity in his eyes, but it was overridden by something else. Greed, or maybe guilt. "Your sister came by this morning," he said. The world stopped spinning for a second. "Kelsey. She explained your situation," he said. "She said you lost your job. She said it would be best for everyone if you moved on now, before debt started piling up. She was very persuasive." He held out the envelope. I took it. Inside, there was a notice to vacate within 48 hours. "And," he added, lowering his voice, "she gave me a cash incentive to process this today, to help cover the turnover costs." "How much?" I whispered. $1,000, he said. I stared at him. $1,000. My sister, Kelsey, who claimed she was struggling to pay off her student loans, who constantly complained about the price of gas, had handed my landlord $1,000 to make me homeless. "This has to be a joke." I said, "It is not a joke. Ms. Bennett, I need the keys by Saturday noon." He turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the doorway with the notice in my hand. The hallway smelled of cleaning solvent and betrayal. I went inside and locked the door. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type on my phone. I dialed Kelsey. She picked up immediately. "Hey, Reagan?" she said. Her voice was bright, chipper, completely devoid of guilt. "You bribed my landlord," I said. I did not scream. I could not scream. The air had been sucked out of my lungs. "I helped you," she corrected. "I heard you got fired. Mom told me. We all talked about it. If you stay in that apartment, you are just going to drain your savings and end up in debt. You need a push." "Reagan, you have gotten too comfortable being mediocre." "Mediocre," I repeated. "I have been supporting myself since I was 22. And look where you are," she said. "Unemployed and begging Mom for a room. This is tough love. Reagan, we are doing this for your own good. You need to hit rock bottom so you can bounce back stronger. It is a psychological thing. I read about it. You paid him $1,000. I said, you could have given me that money to help with rent and enable you." "No way. That money was an investment in your character development. Mom and Dad agree. They agree 100%. We are a united front. Reagan, now, stop whining and start packing. You will thank us in a year." She hung up. I stood in the center of my living room. The silence was deafening. It wasn't just Kelsey. It was my parents. It was a coordinated strike. My entire family had convened a meeting, looked at my life, and decided that the best way to help me was to destroy the little stability I had left. They viewed my struggle as a flaw in my character, rather than a circumstance of the economy. I looked around the apartment. I saw the coffee table I had found at a thrift store and sanded down by hand. I saw the curtains I had hemmed myself. I saw the life I had built, brick by brick, without their help. And now, they had paid a stranger to tear it down. I did not cry. I think I was too in shock to cry. I moved into a state of cold, mechanical efficiency. I did not have boxes. I did not have money for a moving truck. I had a roll of black heavy-duty trash bags and a Honda Civic. I started throwing things away. That is the part nobody tells you about emergency evictions. You have to choose what survives. My clothes went into bags. The kitchen appliances, the blender, the toaster, the heavy ceramic plates. They went into the dumpster behind the building. I could not fit them. I could not carry them. I packed my laptop. I packed my documents. I packed the toiletries. I packed a blanket and a pillow. I looked at my books. I loved those books. I had a collection of paperback thrillers I had been reading since college. I couldn't take them. I put them in a box by the dumpster with a note that said, "Free." It felt like I was leaving pieces of my brain on the pavement. By Saturday morning, my apartment was empty. The walls were bare. The carpets were vacuumed. I left the keys on the counter. I did not say goodbye to Mr. Henderson. I walked down to the parking lot. My car was packed so full that I could not see out of the rear window. The passenger seat was stacked high with bags containing my winter coats and my shoes. The back seat was a wall of black plastic. I squeezed into the driver's seat. The car smelled of stale coffee and old plastic. I turned the key. The engine sputtered, then caught. I drove out of the complex. I did not know where I was going. I drove for hours. I drove past the mall where I used to shop. I drove past the restaurants where I used to meet friends for brunch. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I was in the city I lived in, but I was no longer part of it. I had been erased. My address was gone. My job was gone. My family was gone. The sun began to set, turning the Atlanta skyline into a silhouette of jagged teeth. The reality of the night began to set in. I needed a place to park, a place where I would not be towed, a place where I would not be arrested, a place where I would not be attacked. I found a 24-hour grocery store in a suburb 20 miles north of the city. The parking lot was vast and well lit. There were other cars parked in the far corners, vehicles with sunshades up in the windows, heavily laden with belongings. I was not the only one. I pulled into a spot under a flickering halogen light. I turned off the engine. The silence rushed in. It was hot. I cracked the window an inch, just enough for air but not enough for a hand to reach in. I reclined the seat as far back as it would go, which was not far because of the bags behind me. I draped a towel over the window to block the light. I was 30 years old. I had a degree. I had a clean criminal record, and I was sleeping in a grocery store parking lot because my sister had paid $1,000 to put me here. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Every sound outside a shopping cart rattling, a car door slamming, a siren in the distance made me flinch. I locked the doors, then I checked them again, then I checked them a third time. I laid in the dark, staring at the fabric roof of my car. I tried to close my eyes, but my brain was a slideshow of the last 2 days. Mr. Henderson's shame, Kelsey's laughter, my mother's ice clinking in her glass. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. The screen lit up, casting a harsh blue glow over my makeshift bedroom. For a split second, a foolish, childish part of me thought it might be them. Maybe they had regretted it. Maybe Dad had found out and was driving to get me. Maybe Kelsey had realized this wasn't a game. I picked up the phone. It was a notification from the family group chat. I unlocked the screen. There were no questions about where I was. There was no, "Are you safe?" It was a photo from Kelsey. She had sent a screenshot of a cocktail menu. Thinking mojitos for the weekend getaway, she had typed. "Or should we do margaritas?" My mother had replied with a heart emoji. Margaritas. Definitely. We deserve to relax. I stared at the screen until the light blurred into a watery streak. They were planning drinks. They were planning their weekend at the beach house. They were celebrating. I turned the phone off and threw it into the passenger seat. I pulled the blanket up to my chin, listening to the hum of the grocery store's refrigeration units nearby. The anger didn't come then. That would come later. Right then. There was only the cold, hard realization that the people who were supposed to love me had not just let me fall. They had pushed. The sound that woke me was not a bird or an alarm clock. It was the aggressive, metal-on-metal rattle of a shopping cart train being shoved across asphalt by a teenager in a neon-reflective vest. I jerked awake, gasping, my right arm flailing until it hit the steering wheel. For a terrifying second, I did not know where I was. The air in the car was thick, recycled, and smelled faintly of the unwashed gym clothes I had stuffed into a bag in the back seat. Then the halogen glare of the grocery store parking lot lights flooded my vision, and the crushing weight of reality settled back onto my chest. I was not in my bed. I was in a Honda Civic, parked between a cart return corral and a dumpster, and I was homeless. I checked my phone. It was 3:14 in the morning. My neck was locked in a painful spasm. The driver's seat, no matter how far back it reclined, was not designed for the human spine to rest upon for 6 hours. I tried to stretch, but my legs were cramped against the glove compartment. I sat up, rubbing the fog off the window to see if anyone was watching me. The store was technically open 24 hours, but the parking lot felt like a stage where I was the only performer, and the audience was a patrolling security guard in a white sedan slowly circling the perimeter. I ducked down, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. If he saw me, he would knock. If he knocked, I would have to move. If I moved, I wasted gas, and gas was no longer just fuel. It was my rent, my heat, and my escape route. I lay there for another 3 hours, staring at the fabric of the car roof, waiting for the sun to rise so I could stop pretending to be invisible. When the sky finally turned a bruised shade of purple-gray, I sat up and took stock of my life. I needed a bathroom, I needed caffeine, and I needed to do math that I knew would make me want to vomit. I drove to a gas station 2 miles away to use the restroom. I washed my face in the sink with gritty pink soap that smelled like industrial cleaner. I brushed my teeth while a trucker banged on the door, shouting that he needed to get in. When I looked in the mirror, the woman staring back at me looked like a stranger. My eyes were red-rimmed, my hair was a tangled knot, and my skin had the gray and pasty cast of someone who had not slept deeply. I looked like what I was, a woman falling through the cracks. Back in the car, I opened my banking app. I had to hold my breath to tap the screen. $42.18. That was it. That was the sum total of my liquidity. I had a credit card, but it was nearly maxed out from the car repairs I had paid for 2 months ago. Repairs I had prioritized because I needed to get to the job I no longer had. I did the mental subtraction. A full tank of gas would cost roughly $35. That left me with $7.18 for food. And then there was the notification I had been ignoring for 3 days. My car insurance auto draft was scheduled for Friday. It was $112. I turned the phone off. There was no point in staring at the numbers. They were not going to change. I needed a place to sit where I didn't look like a vagrant. I drove to a chain coffee shop that I knew had free Wi-Fi and bathrooms with actual locking doors. I stood in line behind people wearing business casual, people complaining about the traffic, people worrying about meetings. I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to grab the man in the blue suit by his lapels and tell him that his biggest problem today was my biggest fantasy. I ordered a small drip coffee, $2.40. I paid with the app to avoid looking at the cashier. I took the cup, which felt like a warm anchor in my cold hands, and found a small table in the back corner near an outlet. This was my rent for the day, $2.40 for the right to exist indoors. I opened my laptop and started the humiliating ritual of applying for jobs I was overqualified for, just to get something, anything, coming in. But my mind kept drifting. My thumb, almost of its own volition, hovered over the messaging app on my phone. The family group chat had 6 unread messages. I told myself not to look. I told myself it was emotional self-harm. But I clicked it anyway. The first image was a photo from Kelsey. It was a screenshot of a reservation confirmation for a resort on Tybee Island, the Coastal King Suite. The text read, "Ocean view, private balcony. Just booked it for the weekend." My mother had replied immediately, "Oh, honey, that looks divine. Your father and I need this so bad. The stress lately has been unreal. Tell me about it," Kelsey replied. "I need to decompress. LOL. We will bring the wine," my father added. "You just bring the sunscreen." I scrolled up, then I scrolled down. I refreshed the screen, thinking maybe my connection was bad. Maybe I had missed a message. Maybe, in between the discussion of thread counts and ocean views, someone had asked, "Reagan, where did you sleep last night?" or "Reagan, do you have food?" There was nothing. It wasn't that they were refusing to help me. I had already processed that rejection. It was something far colder. It was the absolute absence of curiosity. To them, I had simply ceased to exist the moment I became inconvenient. I was like a television show they had canceled. They didn't wonder what the characters were doing after the screen went black. I took a sip of my coffee, It was bitter and burnt, but the heat spread through my chest, untying a knot I didn't know was there. I looked at the photo of the resort suite again. It cost $300 a night. I knew that because I had looked at that same resort for my parents' anniversary last year, back when I was the dutiful daughter trying to buy their affection. That thought unlocked a door in my brain I usually kept bolted shut. The memories of the money. I remembered 2 years ago, when the roof of the Tybee Island house, the house they were now vacationing in, had sprung a leak during a tropical storm. My father had called me, panic in his voice, saying he was short on cash because of a bad investment. "Can you float us $2,000? Reagan." Just until next month I had drained my emergency fund. I sent the money within the hour. He never paid me back. When I brought it up 6 months later, he laughed and said, "We raised you. Consider it a tuition reimbursement." I remembered the time Kelsey's car broke down and she needed a new transmission. She called me crying, saying she would lose her job if she couldn't drive. I put $1,200 on my credit card to fix it. She paid me back $200 and then stopped, saying she was focusing on her mental health spending. I had stayed silent. I had swallowed the anger because I thought that was the price of admission to this family. I thought if I was useful, I would be kept. I thought if I was the safety net, they would catch me when I fell. But I was not the safety net. I was the bank. And banks do not get invited to family vacations. They just get robbed. My phone buzzed, startling me so bad I nearly knocked over my cup. It was not the group chat. It was a direct message from a name I hadn't seen in months. Sarah. We had gone to college together. We weren't best friends, but we were the kind of friends who liked each other's posts and commented congratulations on work anniversaries. "Hey, Reagan." The message read, "I saw your post on LinkedIn about the layoff. I am so sorry. That company is notorious for churning and burning. I know we haven't talked in a while, but I saw you are in Atlanta. If you need a place to crash or just a shower and a laundry machine, my couch is open. I know it is not much, but I have been there." I stared at the screen, my vision blurring. A stranger, well, barely more than an acquaintance, was offering me more humanity in 3 sentences than my own blood had offered in 30 years. I wanted to say yes immediately. I wanted to drive to her house and sleep on a surface that didn't have a gear shift. But shame is a heavy coat. I didn't want her to know how bad it was. I didn't want to admit I was homeless. "Thanks, Sarah," I typed back, my fingers trembling. "That is so sweet of you. I might take you up on the shower and laundry offer if that is okay. My building's water is currently shut off for maintenance." It was a lie, but it was a lie that allowed me to keep a shred of dignity. "Come over whenever," she replied. "I'm working from home today." I spent the next 4 hours in the coffee shop, nursing that single cup until it was room temperature sludge. I used the Wi-Fi to download maps to my phone so I wouldn't use data later. I researched safe parking lots. I looked up food banks, though I couldn't bring myself to go to one yet. Around 4 in the afternoon, I drove to Sarah's apartment. It was a small place in Decatur, cluttered and cozy. She didn't ask questions. She gave me a towel, a bar of soap that smelled like lavender, and pointed me to the bathroom. That shower was a religious experience. The hot water hitting my back felt like it was washing away the grime of the parking lot, the judgment of Mr. Henderson, and the cruelty of Kelsey. I stood there until the water turned lukewarm, scrubbing my skin until it was red. I washed my clothes in her machine, watching my only 2 outfits spin in the suds. For 2 hours, I felt human. We ate pizza. We talked about college. I didn't tell her about the eviction. I didn't tell her about the bribe. I let her believe I was just having a rough week. Not a rough life, but I couldn't stay. She had a boyfriend coming over, and the apartment was tiny. I couldn't impose. I thanked her, hugged her a little too tight, and walked back out to my car. The second night was harder than the first. The novelty of the disaster had worn off, leaving only the dull ache of endurance. I found a different parking lot this time, behind a big box hardware store. It was darker, quieter. I settled into the driver's seat, wrapping my blanket around my shoulders. I checked my email one last time before conserving the battery. There was a new message in my primary inbox, the The subject line made my stomach turn over. Final notice past due payment. Account ending in 4429. I frowned. I didn't have an account ending in those numbers. I opened the email. It was from a lending institution called Peach State Finance. It was a notice for a personal loan payment of $450 that was 60 days overdue. The borrower's name listed was my father, Robert Bennett, but my name was listed as the cosigner. I stared at the glowing screen in the dark car. I remembered this. 3 years ago, my father had wanted to renovate the guest cottage at the Tybee Island house, the guest unit. He said he needed my credit score to get a better interest rate because his debt-to-income ratio was temporarily high. He swore he would handle the payments. He said it was just a formality. You are just a signature. Reagan. He had said, I am the one paying. He hadn't paid. For 2 months, he hadn't paid. And now, the creditors were emailing me. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. They were not just ignoring me, they were actively dragging me down with them. While they were booking suites and drinking cocktails, they were letting a loan with my name on it rot, destroying the credit score I would desperately need if I ever wanted to rent an apartment again. I looked at the email. Then I looked at the group chat where Kelsey was now sending photos of swimsuits she planned to wear. A strange sensation washed over me. It wasn't sadness anymore. It wasn't fear. It was clarity. Cold, sharp, crystalline clarity. I sat up in the dark, the plastic seat creaking beneath me. Why was I always the one holding the checkbook? Why was I the one fixing the roofs and signing the loans? Why was I the one sleeping in a car while they slept in a house that, if I remembered correctly, had been left to the family by my grandfather, a man who had barely spoken to my father in his final years? I closed my eyes and pictured the Tybee Island house. I pictured the guest cottage I had co-signed for. I pictured the ocean. There was a web of money and paper tying us all together, for years. I thought that web was a safety net. Now I realized it was a trap. But traps have mechanisms, and mechanisms can be dismantled. I wasn't just a victim in a car. I was a cosigner. I was a financier. I was a witness. And if they wanted to treat me like a stranger, maybe it was time I started acting like a creditor. I didn't sleep much that second night, but when I stared at the ceiling of my car, I wasn't counting my remaining dollars anymore. I was counting the receipts in my memory. And I was starting to realize that the balance was heavily in my favor. The email from the lending institution was still glowing on my phone screen, a digital ember burning a hole in the darkness of my car. The guest unit. That phrase echoed in my head, bouncing off the cold windows. It was an innocuous term, just 2 words, but it dragged my mind away from the miserable, cramped reality of the hardware store parking lot and pulled me back 5 years, to the smell of salt spray, old cedar, and cherry pipe tobacco. It pulled me back to Tybee Island, to understand why the anger that was slowly replacing my fear was so dangerous. You have to understand the house. It was a weathered, 2-story Victorian cottage painted a soft, peeling yellow, sitting just a block back from the dunes. My grandfather, Arthur, had bought it in the 70s for a song. He named it the Sandpiper. It wasn't a mansion, but it had good bones and a wraparound porch that caught the ocean breeze even on the hottest July days. It was the place where my parents were currently sleeping. It was the place Kelsey was driving to for her weekend of margaritas. And it was the place where I had learned that love, in my family, was a transaction I was always on the losing side of. 5 years ago, Grandfather Arthur's health began to fail. It wasn't a sudden dramatic event. It was a slow, agonizing erosion. His lungs were giving out. He needed help with the stairs. He needed someone to make sure he took the right pills at the right time. He needed someone to just sit with him so the silence of the big house didn't swallow him whole. My parents were living in Atlanta then, in a townhouse that cost too much to heat. When the doctor called to say Arthur shouldn't be alone anymore, my mother sighed the heavy sigh of a martyr. "We are just so busy right now," she had said, looking at her calendar as if it contained the nuclear codes. "Your father has his consulting, and I have the garden club board. We simply cannot uproot our lives. Kelsey was 24 then, fresh out of college and finding herself in a series of unpaid internships and expensive yoga retreats. "I can't go," she had chirped. "The island energy is too stagnant for my aura right now. Plus, old people smell like sadness." So of course, it fell to Reagan. I was 25, I was working my first real job, trying to build a career, but I was also the daughter who didn't say no. I was the daughter who sought approval like a plant seeks sunlight. So, for 18 months, I drove 4 hours every Friday night to Tybee Island. I spent my weekends changing oxygen tanks, cooking low-sodium soups, and reading Western novels aloud until my voice rasped. I drove back at 4 in the morning on Mondays, bleary-eyed, fueled by gas station coffee, to make it to my desk by 9. Those weekends were hard, but they were also the only time I felt seen. Arthur wasn't easy. He was grumpy, opinionated, and stubborn. But he watched. He watched me scrub the floors my mother wouldn't touch. He watched me fix the leaking faucet in the kitchen because my father said it wasn't worth the plumber's fee. He watched me cancel dates and miss parties to sit on the porch with him, listening to the same stories about the Navy for the 100th time. One afternoon, about a month before he passed, he grabbed my wrist. His grip was weak, his skin like parchment paper over bone. "Where are they?" "Reagan," he asked. I knew who he meant. "They are busy." "Grandpa, Mom sends her love. Kelsey sent that edible arrangement. Remember?" He looked at the basket of sweating melon balls on the counter with disdain. "Fruit rots," he rasped. "Presence lasts. You are the only one here. Reagan, you are the only one who showed up." I brushed it off. I told him it was fine. I told him I liked being there, and I did. In a way, I loved the house. I loved the way the light hit the floorboards in the afternoon. I loved the guest cottage in the back, a small, separate studio that had been used as a potting shed until Arthur converted it in the 90s. When Arthur died, the funeral was a masterpiece of performance art. My mother wept into a lace handkerchief she had bought specifically for the occasion. My father gave a eulogy about legacy and family values. Kelsey wore a black dress that cost more than my car and posted a selfie with the coffin. Captioned, "Rest in power, King." I stood in the back, numb. I didn't cry. I had done my crying on the drive home those quiet Monday mornings. Then came the reading of the will. We gathered in the lawyer's office a woman named Evelyn Price, who had eyes like a hawk and a handshake that could crush walnuts. My parents sat in the front, holding hands, expecting the standard division. They had already started talking about selling the house. "The market is hot," my father had whispered in the waiting room. "We could clear $500,000 easy." Evelyn Price opened the folder. She adjusted her glasses. To my daughter and her husband. She read, "I leave my investment portfolio and the contents of my savings account." My parents nodded, satisfied. It was a decent sum. "To my granddaughter Kelsey," Evelyn continued, "I leave my collection of antique coins." Kelsey wrinkled her nose. "Coins. Can I spend them?" And Evelyn paused, looking directly at me. "To my granddaughter Reagan, who knows the sound of the house breathing and who held my hand when everyone else held their excuses. I leave the property at 104 Ocean View Lane, Tybee Island, Georgia, including all structures and contents therein." The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy enough to crush the breath out of you. "Excuse me." My mother's voice was high and thin. "There must be a mistake, Reagan." "But she is just a child. The will is clear," Evelyn said, snapping the folder shut. "The house belongs to Reagan." The drive home that day was a war zone. My parents didn't scream. They didn't yell. They did something much more effective. They reasoned. They gaslit. They eroded. "It is too much responsibility for you," my father said, his voice dripping with faux concern. "The taxes alone will drown you. You don't know how to manage property." Grandpa wasn't in his right mind at the end. My mother added, "He was confused. He probably thought you were me. It is cruel to keep it, really. It belongs to the family patriarch. But for once, I had held firm. I kept the house. The deed was in my name. However, I made a mistake, a fatal, sentimental mistake. I felt guilty. I felt guilty for inheriting the crown jewel when my parents only got money. So, when they asked if they could stay there for a while, to clear out the attic and sort through the memories, I said yes. That while turned into a month, then a season, then a year. They sold their townhouse in Atlanta. They moved into my house full-time. They told their friends they had retired to the family estate. They posted photos of the view from the master bedroom, my master bedroom, and soaked in the envy of their peers. And I let them. I stayed in my rented apartment in the city, working my support job, convincing myself that this was the noble thing to do. I was the good daughter. I was providing for my parents. But here was the kicker: I was paying for it, too. For the last 4 years, every property tax bill that came to the Tybee house was forwarded to me. "This is your name on the deed, sweetie," my mother would say on the phone. "We would pay it, but our funds are tied up in investments right now. Since you own it, it is really your responsibility." So I paid. I paid $4,000 a year in property taxes. I paid $2,000 a year for hazard insurance when the water heater blew up last winter. I paid $1,200 to replace it because my father said, "Well, we can't take cold showers in your house, Reagan." I sat in my freezing car, wrapping the thin blanket tighter around my shoulders. The math began to rearrange itself in my head. I had spent roughly $30,000 over the last 4 years maintaining a house I didn't live in. For people who had just bribed a landlord $1,000 to make me homeless. But the email about the loan, that was the piece that turned the key in the lock. The guest unit, the loan was for renovations. My father had told me he wanted to fix up the guest cottage for friends and family. He needed a co-signer because his credit utilization was high. I had signed because I trusted him. I grabbed my laptop. I had about 12% battery left. I tethered it to my phone and opened a browser. I went to a popular vacation rental website. I typed in Tybee Island. I zoomed in on the map to the street where my house stood. There it was. It was listed as the Sea Glass Cottage, luxury guest suite. I clicked on the listing. The photos were professional. There was the kitchenette I had paid to renovate. There was the bathroom with the subway tile I had chosen. There was the little private patio. I looked at the host profile. It wasn't me. It was a profile named Coastal Charm Managers, featuring a photo of my smiling parents holding wine glasses. Superhost, the badge said. 5-star rating. I clicked on the calendar. It was booked solid. July was full. August was full. September was full. I looked at the nightly rate. $250 a night. My heart stopped beating for a second. I pulled up the calculator app. $250 a night. Assuming a 60% occupancy rate, which was conservative for Tybee in the summer, that was roughly $4,500 a month. My parents were generating over $50,000 a year from a structure that sat on my land. $50,000, and I had never seen a penny. They were collecting rent on my property. They were living rent-free in my main house. They were making me pay the taxes and the insurance and the repairs. And when I lost my job, when I needed a place to stay, they didn't offer me the guest unit. They didn't offer me the couch. They didn't even offer me a slice of the $50,000 they were stealing from me. Instead, they paid my landlord $1,000 to kick me onto the street. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was jagged and sharp. It was the sound of a worldview shattering. They weren't just mean. They weren't just selfish. They were parasites. They had been feeding on me for years, draining my finances, my credit, and my self-worth, all while convincing me that I was the burden. I looked at the rental listing again. I saw a review from last week. The hosts, Robert and Linda, were so charming. They told us all about how they restored this old family home themselves. Lies. It was all lies. I closed the laptop before the battery died. I sat in the darkness, the silence of the parking lot pressing in on me. I wasn't just a homeless woman in a car anymore. I was a landlord. I was a property owner. I was the legal sole proprietor of a prime piece of real estate on the Georgia coast. and I had been acting like a doormat. I reached for my phone. I didn't open the family chat. I didn't look at the photos of margaritas. I opened my archived emails. I searched for a name I hadn't thought about in 4 years. Price. The search results spun for a second, before pulling up an old thread. Estate of Arthur J. Miller. Final documents. I opened the email. There was a PDF attachment of the deed, and there, in the signature block of the email, was a phone number. Evelyn Price, attorney at law. I stared at the number. It was 3 a.m. I couldn't call now, but the number felt like a weapon in my hand. It felt like a grenade I could pull the pin on. For years, I had been afraid of rocking the boat. I had been afraid that if I asserted my rights, I would lose my family. I had paid the taxes and signed the loans and stayed silent because I wanted them to love me. But they didn't love me. They loved the house. They loved the income. They loved the convenience of me. I looked at the dashboard of my car. The fuel gauge was leaning toward empty. My stomach was growling. My back was screaming in pain. If I pressed the call button in 5 hours, when the sun came up, everything would change. There would be no going back. It would be a declaration of war. It would destroy the facade they had built. It would likely end my relationship with them forever. I thought about Kelsey's text. It is a psychological thing. We are doing this for your own good. I looked at the phone number again. You wanted me to grow up. Mom, I whispered to the empty car. You wanted me to stand on my own 2 feet. My thumb hovered over the save contact button. Okay, I said. I'll stand. I called Evelyn Price at 9 o'clock in the morning. Exactly 1 minute after her firm opened, I expected a receptionist, a gatekeeper, or a voicemail hellscape. Instead, I got her paralegal, who put me on hold for less than 30 seconds before a voice like crushed gravel and expensive scotch came on the line. Reagan Bennett. Evelyn said, I was wondering when you would call. That sentence threw me. I was sitting in my car, which was parked 3 blocks away from her office in downtown Savannah. I had driven 4 hours south on the last fumes of my gas tank, fueled by adrenaline and a packet of vending machine peanuts. I had used a bottle of water and a napkin to scrub the sleep out of my eyes. I looked like a wreck, but I sounded, I hoped, like a client. You were expecting me, I asked. I represent the estate, Reagan, she replied. And I read the obituaries. I also read the property tax filings. I have seen the names on the checks change. Come in. I have an opening at 10. Walking into the offices of Price. Miller Associates felt like stepping into a different century. The air was cool and smelled of leather bindings and lemon polish. I felt conspicuously underdressed in my wrinkled button-down and jeans. But when I was ushered into Evelyn's corner office, she didn't look at my clothes. She looked at my eyes. She was older than I remembered, her silver hair cut into a sharp, architectural bob, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my entire student loan debt. She stood up and extended a hand. You look like him, she said softly. Arthur, you have his chin. I shook her hand. It was dry and firm. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. Evelyn, sit, she commanded, pointing to a high-backed leather chair. I sat. The leather creaked, a sound that felt deafening in the quiet room. I placed my hands on my lap to hide the fact that they were shaking. I need help, I said. I know, she said. She opened a thick file folder on her desk. She didn't waste time with small talk. She didn't ask about the weather. She flipped past a few yellowed pages and landed on a document with a blue seal. Let us review the basics, shall we, she said, sliding her glasses down her nose. According to the last will and testament of Arthur J. Miller, probate closed 4 years ago. The title for the property at 104 Ocean View Lane was transferred to you, Reagan Bennett, in fee simple absolute. Do you know what that means? It means I own it. I said, it means you own it entirely. She corrected. It means there are no co-owners, no trustees, no conditions. The house, the land, the guest cottage, and every grain of sand within the property lines belongs to you. Your parents, Robert and Linda Bennett, are legal guests. They are tenants at will. They have no ownership interest, None. Zero. She looked up at me. So, tell me why I received a request for a subordination agreement from a bank 2 days ago listing Robert Bennett as the owner. My breath hitched. A subordination agreement. She pulled a sheet of paper from a stack and slid it across the mahogany desk. It was a letter from a commercial lender. They are trying to take out a second mortgage, Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a dangerous chill. Or rather, a business line of credit secured by the property. They listed the asset as theirs. The bank did a title search, saw your name, and assumed it was a clerical error or a trust situation. They sent this to me because I am listed as the preparer of the original deed. They want me to clarify the chain of title so they can process your father's loan. I stared at the paper. The amount requested was $75,000. They are trying to mortgage my house, I whispered. They are attempting to encumber a property they do not own. Evelyn said, that is fraud. Reagan, plain and simple. If they had succeeded, and they defaulted, the bank could have foreclosed on you. I felt a wave of nausea. It wasn't just the guest cottage rental money. It wasn't just the free living. They were actively trying to leverage my inheritance to fund their lifestyle, risking my ownership in the process. I didn't know. I said, I knew about the guest cottage. I found out last night they were renting it out on Airbnb. But I didn't know about this. Evelyn leaned back, steepled her fingers, and looked at me with an expression that was half pity, half predator. Reagan, where are you living right now? I swallowed hard. I couldn't lie to her. Not here. Not with the smell of old law books surrounding me. In my car. I said, my voice cracked. She didn't flinch. Why my landlord evicted me 3 days ago. I said, I lost my job. I asked my parents if I could come home to the house I own, and they told me to grow up. Then, I paused, the shame burning my cheeks. Then she prompted. Then my sister, Kelsey, went to my landlord. She gave him $1,000 cash to terminate my lease immediately. She told him it was tough love. The room went silent. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner seemed to slow down. Evelyn Price slowly took off her glasses and set them on the desk. Repeat that, she said. Her voice was very quiet. She bribed him. I said, $1,000 to kick me out. Evelyn picked up a silver pen and made a note on a legal pad. The scratching sound was aggressive. That changes the texture of things, she said. That is not just a family dispute. Reagan, that is tortious interference with a contract. Depending on how the landlord accepted it and processed the eviction, we are looking at wrongful eviction and potential damages. Your sister didn't just play a prank. She interfered with your legal housing status. She looked up, her eyes blazing, and she did this while your parents were attempting to defraud a bank using your collateral. Yes. I said. Evelyn closed the file. It was a heavy, final sound. You are not a victim here. Reagan, she said firmly. You are a landlord dealing with rogue tenants and hostile third parties. We are going to stop treating them like your mommy and daddy. We are going to treat them like what they are, squatters and liabilities. She spun her chair toward her computer. Here's the map, she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. First, we stop the bleeding. I am going to reply to this bank inquiry immediately. I will inform them that Robert Bennett has no claim to the title and that any attempt to use the property as collateral is fraudulent. That will kill the loan application by noon today. I nodded. A small spark of satisfaction lit up in my chest. Second, she continued, we need to secure the asset. You said they are renting out the guest unit, yes. I said, it is booked solid for the summer. Do you have access to the listing? I saw it online. I can find it. Good. Print everything. Reviews, dates, pricing. We will calculate the unjust enrichment later. For now, we need possession. Since there is no written lease, they are tenants at will. In Georgia, we have to give them 60 days' notice to vacate. 60 days, I asked. That feels like a lifetime. I am sleeping in a parking lot. Evelyn, she raised a hand. 60 days is the standard. However, if we can prove they are damaging the property and attempting to leverage it for debt counts as endangering the title, we might be able to accelerate. But I want to do this by the book. We are going to be so legally perfect that they won't have a single inch of wiggle room. We will serve them a notice to quit. Today. She looked at me. Are you ready to do that? This isn't a warning shot. Reagan, this is an eviction. I thought about the cocktail emojis. I thought about the text from Kelsey saying it is a psychological thing. I thought about the nights I spent freezing in my car while they sold the view from my porch to strangers for $250 a night. They didn't give me 60 days. I said, they gave me 48 hours. Evelyn nodded. And the law will punish them for that. Eventually. But you are going to be better than them. You are going to be methodical. She pressed a button on her intercom. Sarah, bring me the standard notice to terminate tenancy at will, and draft a cease and desist regarding the unauthorized short-term rental operation. She turned back to me. We are also going to demand an accounting of all rental income generated from the guest cottage. That money belongs to you. If they spent it, they owe it. It is called disgorgement of profits. Disgorgement. I repeated. It sounded violent. It sounded appropriate. One more thing. Evelyn said. She leaned forward. This sister of yours, Kelsey, if we can prove the bribe, and if we can prove the landlord acted on it illegally, we can go after both of them. Did she leave a paper trail? She texted me. I said, she bragged about it. She said it was an investment in my character. Evelyn's smile was thin and terrifying. Then she handed us the knife. She said, never put your malice in writing. That is rule number 1. She printed a document and slid it across the desk. It was a power of attorney. I need you to sign this, she said. It authorizes me to act on your behalf regarding the property and to communicate with your tenants. It means you don't have to talk to them. You don't have to listen to their guilt trips. You direct all communication to me. I become the wall. I picked up the pen. It was heavy. Expensive metal. My hand hovered over the signature line. For 30 years, I had been the peacekeeper. I had been the one who fixed the leaks and paid the taxes and apologized for things I didn't do. I had let them live in my house because I thought it would make them love me. I had let them treat me like a child because I was afraid to be an adult. But adults don't sleep in cars while their tenants drink wine on their dime. Adults don't let their credit be ruined by fraudsters. If I sign this, I said, looking at Evelyn, there is no going back. They will hate me. Evelyn looked at me with a softness I hadn't expected. Reagan, she said, they left you homeless. They are stealing from you. They don't hate you. They just don't respect you. This signature isn't about revenge. It is about demanding respect. And frankly, it is exactly what Arthur would have wanted. He didn't leave that house to them for a reason. I looked at the paper. The black ink of the printed text seemed to vibrate. Reagan Bennett, owner. I remembered the sound of the shopping carts rattling in the parking lot at 3 a.m. I remembered the shame of hiding from the security guard. I pressed the pen to the paper. I didn't scribble. I signed my name clearly. Reagan Bennett. I put the pen down. It is done, Evelyn said, pulling the paper away. Now, I suggest you go get a decent meal. I'm going to make some phone calls. And Reagan. Yes. Turn your phone off, she said. The storm is coming. And you don't need to get wet. Let the paper do the talking. I walked out of her office 10 minutes later. The sun was shining on the Savannah streets. I still had no job. I still had no apartment. My bank account was still empty. But as I walked to my car, I felt something I hadn't felt in days. I felt the weight of the keys in my pocket, and for the first time, I knew exactly which lock they opened. The silence of the third day was different. The first 2 days had been the silence of shock, the vacuum left by a life imploding. But the silence of the third day, sitting in my car in a shaded corner of a public library parking lot, was the silence of a sniper waiting for the wind to settle. I was no longer scrambling for survival. I was setting up the board. I had spent the morning with Evelyn Price, and now, the machinery she controlled was beginning to turn. It was invisible, quiet, and devastatingly effective. At 10 o'clock that morning, a courier had been dispatched from Savannah to Tybee Island. He carried a heavy cream-colored envelope containing the notice to quit. It was not a polite request. It was a legal demand citing Georgia property statutes, informing Robert and Linda Bennett that their tenancy at will was being terminated. It gave them 60 days to vacate the premises of 104 Ocean View Lane. It outlined the walkthrough procedures. It explicitly stated that any removal of fixtures, appliances, or furniture belonging to the estate would be considered theft. But that was the long game. I needed to make a move in the short game. I opened my laptop, tethered to the library's free Wi-Fi. I logged into my primary bank account. For years, I had treated my finances like a leaky boat, constantly bailing out water to keep my family afloat while I slowly sank. I had auto-pay set up that I had stopped questioning years ago. I looked at the list. Coastal Pest Control, $45 a month. Tybee Island Landscaping, $120 a month. Georgia Power Tybee account averaged $200 a month. Xfinity Cable and Internet Tybee account, $180 a month. My parents lived in my house, and I paid their bills. They had convinced me this was fair because they were maintaining the asset by living there. I had believed them. I had believed that paying $500 a month was a small price to keep the family peace. I clicked on the pest control link. Cancel service. Reason for cancellation: property owner no longer responsible for tenant expenses. I clicked on the landscaping. Cancel service. Then came the utilities. I could not legally shut off the water or electricity completely, as that would be considered a constructive eviction and could get me in trouble. Evelyn had warned me about that. But the cable. The high-speed internet they used to stream movies and manage their Airbnb listings, that was a luxury. I called the cable company. It took 20 minutes of hold time. When the representative answered, I gave my account number. I would like to terminate service at the service address. Effective immediately. I said. The representative tried to offer me a retention deal. She offered me HBO for free. She offered to lower the rate. No, I said, my voice flat. You do not understand. I am not negotiating a price. I am cutting off the supply. When I hung up, I felt a strange, cold thrill in my chest. It was the sensation of taking my hand off the checkbook. For the first time in 4 years, the money appearing in my account next month would stay there. But I was not done. Evelyn had told me to look for exposure. She wanted to know everywhere my name was tied to theirs. I pulled up my full credit report. It was 40 pages long. I started scrolling, looking for anything that wasn't my student loans or my own credit cards. I found the loan for the guest cottage renovation. I already knew about that one, but as I dug into the details, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The loan wasn't categorized as a home improvement loan. It was a small business loan. The borrower was listed as Bennett Ventures, LLC. I looked up the LLC on the Secretary of State website. The registered agent was my father. The business purpose was listed as tourism and hospitality management. My father hadn't just borrowed money to fix a roof. He had started a business using my credit and my property as the foundation, and he hadn't told me. He had made me a silent partner in a venture I didn't own. Liable for debts I didn't incur. I took a screenshot. I saved it to a folder named Evidence. Then I kept scrolling. I found an auto lease from 2 years ago. I remembered this. Kelsey had gotten a new job in sales that required a reliable vehicle. My parents had called me, putting me on speakerphone. We are tapped out this month because of the market. My dad had said, "Can you just co-sign so she can drive it off the lot?" She will make the payments. I had signed. I hadn't even looked at the car. According to the credit report, the car was a luxury sedan, an Audi A4. The monthly payment was $650, and there were 3 late payments in the last year. I sat back in my car seat, feeling the heat rising up my neck. I was driving a 10-year-old Civic with a check engine light that I was praying wouldn't turn into a breakdown. I was sleeping in parking lots. Meanwhile, my sister was driving a car that cost more than my rent used to be, and I was the one whose credit score took the hit when she decided to buy shoes instead of paying the bill. I emailed Evelyn immediately. Subject: additional liabilities. Evelyn, I found an auto lease for Kelsey and a business loan for Dad. I am the guarantor on both. What do we do?" Her reply came 3 minutes later. It was efficient and brutal. We draft a demand letter to the creditors. We inform them that the primary borrower is in possession of the asset, but has demonstrated financial instability. We demand a release of guarantor, or we force the sale of the asset. And for the business loan, if they used your property address for a business license without your consent, that is fraud. I will notify the bank that the business has no lease agreement and therefore no legal standing to operate at that location. It was a scorched earth tactic. If I did this, the bank would call the loan. My father's business would collapse. Kelsey might lose her car. I hesitated for exactly 1 second. Then I remembered the text message about the character investment. I remembered the $1,000. "Do it," I typed back. I spent the next 2 hours becoming a historian of my own exploitation. I went through 4 years of bank statements. I searched for every Zelle transfer, every Venmo payment, every check I had written to them. August 2022. $400 to Mom for groceries. December 2023. $1,200 to Dad for emergency repairs. March 2024. $300 to Kelsey for networking event tickets. I built a spreadsheet. I categorized every dollar. I found the property tax receipts I had paid. I found the insurance premiums. I found the invoice for the water heater. The total at the bottom of the spreadsheet was staggering. It was enough for a down payment on a house of my own. It was enough to have kept me safe for a year without a job. But the biggest revelation came when I went back to the Airbnb listing. I needed to know where the money was going. Evelyn had said we could demand an accounting, but I wanted to know now. I dug through my old emails, searching for anything related to the guest house renovation. I found an email thread from 3 years ago where my father had asked me to set up the Wi-Fi for the guest unit. Just use this email address for the account. He had written, tybeguest@gmail.com. I had the password because I had set it up. I had never logged in since. I went to Gmail. I typed in the address. The password still worked. My parents were not tech-savvy. They never deleted anything. I found the confirmation emails from the rental platform. Payout sent $845. Payout sent $1,200. I opened one of the payout notifications. It listed the last 4 digits of the bank account receiving the funds. It wasn't their main checking account. It was an account ending in 7788. I didn't recognize it. I searched the inbox for bank statement. I found one. It was a digital statement for an online-only high-yield savings account. The account nickname was listed at the top. The Retirement Dream Fund. I opened the PDF. The balance was over $40,000. I stared at the number. $40,000. They had $40,000 sitting in a savings account. Liquid cash. Generated from my property. And yet, when I told them I lost my job, they told me to grow up. When I asked for a place to stay, they said no. When my sister bribed my landlord, they called it tough love. They weren't broke. They weren't struggling. They were hoarding wealth extracted from me while watching me drown. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but it wasn't from sadness. It was from the sheer, icy shock of the betrayal. It was the realization that I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a resource. I was a coal mine they were stripping bare. I saved the bank statement. I forwarded it to Evelyn. We found the money. I wrote, "Get it back." I closed the laptop. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I had done enough for one day. I had cut the cable. I had canceled the services. I had exposed the loans. I had found the hidden hoard. I hadn't screamed at anyone. I hadn't sent a single angry text. I had simply turned the lights on in a room they had kept dark for years. And the reality was uglier than I could have imagined. I sat there, watching people walk into the library, oblivious to the war I was waging from my passenger seat. Then, my phone buzzed. It sat on the dashboard, vibrating against the plastic. It was a text message. I looked at the sender, Mom. It was the first time she had reached out since the margaritas text in the group chat. My heart hammered against my ribs, a physical reflex of the old fear. The fear of disappointing her. The fear of being the bad child. I picked up the phone. The text was short. There were no emojis this time. "There is a sheriff's deputy in the driveway. He just handed your father a packet of papers. He says we have to sign for them. Reagan." What is going on? This better be a mistake. I looked at the words. I could hear her voice sharp, demanding, confused that the world was not bending to her will. She wasn't asking if I was okay. She wasn't asking why I had done it. She was demanding to know why her comfort was being interrupted. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot of the text and sent it to Evelyn. Then, I put the phone on Do Not Disturb. I started the car. The engine rattled, a reminder of my reality, but I didn't mind it as much tonight. I drove out of the parking lot, heading toward a rest stop where I could sleep for a few hours. The first domino had fallen. The sound it made was louder than I expected. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that the crash was only just beginning. The fallout began exactly 45 minutes after I sent the screenshot of my mother's text to Evelyn. I had expected a delay, a period of stunned silence while they processed the legal documents the deputy had shoved into their hands. I was wrong. Panic, it turns out, is an immediate accelerant. I was sitting in my car, parked in the far corner of a Target parking lot, because their Wi-Fi signal drifted just far enough past the front doors for me to use it without buying anything. I was eating a granola bar that had crumbled into a mess of oats and dry chocolate chips, trying to keep the crumbs off my lap, when my phone screen lit up. It was my mother. I stared at the name, Mom. It used to bring me comfort. Now, it looked like a threat. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. She called again immediately, then a third time. Evelyn had told me I didn't have to answer. She had told me I could let the lawyers do the talking. But there is a muscle memory to obedience that takes more than 3 days to break. And a darker part of me, the part that had been sleeping in a Honda Civic for 72 hours, wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear the sound of their reality shattering. I answered on the 4th ring. Reagan. Her voice was a shriek, high and jagged, devoid of the Southern belle charm she usually cultivated. Reagan, what have you done? I kept my voice low and steady. Hello? Mother? Do not, hello, mother me, she screamed. There is a sheriff's deputy, a uniformed officer. Reagan, who just served your father with an eviction notice. A notice to quit. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? The neighbors were watching Mrs. Gable was walking her poodle and she saw everything I looked at the half-eaten granola bar in my hand. I am sorry, Mrs. Gable saw that. I said, but legal notices have to be served in person. You are evicting us. She started to cry. But it wasn't the soft, sympathetic weeping she used to get her way. It was the hyperventilating, weaponized sobbing of a woman who has lost control of the script. We are your parents. We raised you. We fed you. How can you be so cruel? You are tearing this family apart. I didn't say anything. I let her cry. I listened to the gasps, waiting for the pause. We just need a little more time, she sobbed, shifting gears seamlessly from accusation to bargaining. Just a few months, or a year. You know your father's blood pressure can't take this stress. Do you want to kill him? Reagan. Is that it? You want to give your father a stroke? I closed my eyes. It was a masterclass in manipulation. First the shame, then the guilt, then the medical threat. You didn't ask for time when you told Kelsey to pay my landlord. I said, my voice sounded strange to my own ears, cold, detached, like I was reading from a textbook. You didn't ask if my blood pressure could handle homelessness. There was a scrambling sound on the other end, the fumbling of a phone being snatched away. Reagan. My father's voice roared through the speaker. He didn't sound frail. He sounded furious. You listen to me right now, young lady. You call this lawyer this Price woman, and you tell her to withdraw this nonsense immediately. I can't do that. Dad, I said, it is already filed. You are ruining me, he shouted. Do you know what happens if the bank finds out I am being evicted from my business address? I have investors. Reagan, I have a reputation in this town. I have spent 40 years building a name. And you are torching it because of a temper tantrum. A temper tantrum, I repeated. I am sleeping in a car. Dad, I am washing my face in gas station sinks. So you punish us. You destroy my livelihood. We are your blood. We are your flesh and blood. You don't sue your own father. The word blood hung in the air, thick and heavy. I took a deep breath. The question had been sitting in my throat for 3 days, sharp as a piece of glass. If blood matters so much, I said, my voice cutting through his shouting, then which part of our bloodline authorized you to accept a bribe to put me on the street? Silence. It wasn't a quiet silence. It was a choked, suffocating silence. It was the sound of a man who had been punched in the solar plexus. I waited. Dad, I said, which part of the family honor was involved when you high-fived Kelsey for slipping Mr. Henderson $1,000? He sputtered. That is not, Kelsey, was just, we were trying to help you. You were trying to help me by making me homeless while you have $40,000 in a savings account generated from my property, I asked. The silence stretched longer this time. The mention of the money, the specific, secret money, hit its mark. He knew that I knew. You have 60 days, I said. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. They were shaking from the adrenaline of finally saying the words. I put the phone down on the passenger seat and stared out the window. A woman was pushing a shopping cart full of throw pillows toward her car. Normal life was happening all around me, but I felt like I had just stepped off a battlefield. I didn't stay in the Target parking lot. I felt exposed. I drove to a public park about 5 miles away, a place with dense trees and a secluded lot near the walking trails. I needed to breathe. I needed to let the conversation settle before I planned my next move. I parked the car and leaned my seat back. I closed my eyes for a moment. When I opened them, a silver Audi was pulling into the spot directly perpendicular to me, blocking me in. My stomach dropped. I knew that car. I was the one paying for it. Kelsey got out. She wasn't wearing her usual boho chic influencer outfit. She was wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, and her face was blotchy without makeup. She looked rattled. She marched over to my window and banged on the glass. Reagan, open the door. I hesitated. I checked the locks. Then, slowly, I rolled the window down 2 inches. What do you want, Kelsey? She looked wild. She grabbed the top of the window glass with her manicured fingers. Are you insane? She hissed. I just got an alert from my credit monitoring service. Chase is reviewing my auto lease. They sent a letter to the guarantor. I looked at her. I didn't blink. That is what happens when the guarantor notifies them of potential default. I said, You are going to tank my credit score, she shrieked. Do you know how hard I worked to get it over 700? If they pull the lease, I lose the car. If I lose the car, I can't get to my sales calls. You are literally sabotaging my career. I looked at the Audi behind her. It was gleaming in the afternoon sun. You sabotaged my life for $1,000. Kelsey, I said, you thought it was funny. You called it a lesson. She stopped screaming. Her face changed. The anger melted into a desperate, cajoling expression that was even more unsettling. Look, she said, lowering her voice. Okay, I get it. You are mad. I would be mad too. It was a joke that went too far. Okay, I admit it. It was a bad call. A joke I repeated. She reached into her hoodie pocket. She pulled out a thick white envelope. I brought cash, she said, rushing the words. Here, it is $1,500. That is the $1,000 I gave the landlord. Plus $500 for your trouble. You can get a hotel. You can get a nice dinner. Just take it. Reagan, take it and call the lawyer and tell her to stop. She tried to jam the envelope through the crack in the window. It hit the glass and fell onto the pavement. I stared at the white envelope lying on the dirty asphalt. It looked pathetic. I don't want your money. I said, everyone wants money, she snapped. Don't be a martyr. $1,500. Reagan, that is, like, 2 weeks of pay for you. Just take it and let's go back to normal. Mom is freaking out. Dad is throwing things. Just fix it. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in years. I saw the panic in her eyes. It wasn't panic about me sleeping in a car. It wasn't remorse. It was the terrified realization that her shield was gone. She had spent her entire life hiding behind my parents, and my parents had hidden behind me. Now that I had stepped out of the line, the wind was hitting them, and they couldn't handle the cold. It is not about the money, Kelsey, I said softly. Then what is it about? She cried, throwing her hands up. What do you want? An apology. Fine. I am sorry. I paid the landlord. Are you happy? No. I said, I am not happy, because you still think this is a transaction. You think you can buy a clear conscience for $1,500. You think I am a vending machine that you can kick until I give you what you want. I started the engine. Reagan, don't you dare drive away, she yelled. My car is right there. You will hit it. Move it, I said, or I will let the bank know exactly where to send the tow truck. She stared at me, her mouth open. She saw something in my face she hadn't seen before. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the fact that I had absolutely nothing left to lose. She grabbed the envelope off the ground and ran back to her Audi. She reversed out of the spot so fast her tires screeched. I watched her speed away. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired. I drove out of the park and found a spot at a truck stop near the highway. I needed to be somewhere anonymous. I needed to be somewhere where nobody knew my name or my license plate. My phone buzzed again. It was an email from Evelyn. Subject: Update on lender inquiry. I opened it. Reagan, the demand letters have gone out. The bank holding the business loan for Bennett Ventures contacted me immediately. They were very interested to learn that the business address is a private residence owned by a third party who did not consent to commercial use. They have initiated a fraud review. Apparently, your father submitted a statement of assets listing the Tybee Island property as his primary equity. Since the title search contradicts this, they are freezing the line of credit pending an investigation. He will likely receive a call from their compliance department within the hour. Also, regarding the unauthorized rental income, we have a forensic accountant looking at the transfer patterns. If they moved that money across state lines or mixed it with other funds, the tax implications for them will be severe. Stay strong. They are going to get louder before they get quiet. Evelyn, I put the phone down. A fraud review. A frozen credit line. Evelyn wasn't kidding. She wasn't just slapping their wrists. She was dismantling their financial identity. My father had built his entire self-worth on the image of the successful businessman. He loved to lecture me about fiscal responsibility. He loved to tell me that I wasn't hungry enough, and all this time, he had been feeding his success with lies written on paper that belonged to me. The phone rang again. It wasn't my parents. It wasn't Kelsey. The caller ID said Uncle Jerry. Jerry wasn't really my uncle. He was my father's college roommate, a man who played golf with my dad every Sunday and had given me a savings bond for my high school graduation. I debated not answering. I knew what this was. This was the flying monkey. This was the recruitment of the tribe. I picked up, "Hello, Jerry, Reagan." His voice was booming and jovial, but with a hard edge underneath. "Your dad just called me. He sounds pretty upset." "Kiddo, he has a lot to be upset about." I said, "Now, listen," Jerry said, his tone shifting to the condescending baritone men use when explaining the world to women they think are hysterical. "I know things are tough. Losing a job is hard. I have been there, but you don't take it out on your folks. Your dad is a good man. He has provided for you your whole life. He didn't provide me with a place to sleep 3 nights ago." "Jerry," I said, "he told me about that." Jerry said quickly, "He said it was a misunderstanding, a tough love thing that got blown out of proportion, but suing them, trying to get them kicked out of their home, that is below the belt. Reagan, that is not how we treat family. He is devastated. He is talking about his heart condition." I gripped the steering wheel. Jerry didn't know about the stolen rent. He didn't know about the fraud. He only knew the story my father had spun, the story of the ungrateful, unstable daughter attacking her elderly parents. "Did he tell you he tried to mortgage my house without my knowledge?" I asked. Jerry paused. "What did he tell you they made $50,000 renting out my guest cottage and kept every cent while I paid the taxes?" I asked. There was a silence on the line. I could hear the background noise of a television in Jerry's house. "Look, Reagan," Jerry said, his voice less certain now. "I don't know the details of the paperwork. I just know that you only get one set of parents. You don't want to look back in 10 years and regret destroying that relationship over money. Money is just paper. Family is forever. Family is the people who don't bribe your landlord to make you homeless." I said, "Tell my dad to save his breath for the bank investigators." "Jerry, he's going to need it." I hung up. I blocked Jerry's number. Then I went into my contacts and blocked my aunt, my cousins, and 3 of my parents' neighbors. I was sealing the airlock. I sat in the truck stop as the sun went down. I watched the truckers climbing into their cabs, settling in for the night. I ate the rest of my crumbled granola bar. The guilt was still there, a dull ache in my chest. It was hard to turn off 30 years of conditioning. A part of me still wanted to fix it for them. A part of me wanted to call Evelyn and say, "Stop. It is too much." But then I remembered the look on Kelsey's face in the parking lot. She hadn't looked at me with love. She had looked at me with annoyance. She had looked at me like a broken appliance that was making a loud noise. And my mother's tears. They weren't for me. They were for the loss of the view. They were for the loss of the status. They were for the loss of the easy life I had subsidized with my silence. They weren't afraid of hurting me. They had already done that, and they had slept soundly afterwards. They were afraid of the consequences, and for the first time in my life, I was going to let the consequences knock on the door, and I wasn't going to answer it for them. I adjusted my seat, pulled my blanket up to my chin, and prepared for my 4th night in the car. It was cold, but the air felt cleaner than it had in years, while the chaos was unfolding on Tybee Island with my parents. I turned my attention back to the origin of the disaster Atlanta. Specifically, Mr. Henderson and the apartment I had been forced to vacate. Evelyn had sent a formal letter to Mr. Henderson's leasing office, which was really just a P.O. box at a UPS store, demanding the official documentation for the lease termination. The letter was a work of art. It didn't accuse him of anything. It simply asked for the procedural verification of the immediate termination for cause, and inquired about the disposition of the security deposit and any third-party payments received in relation to the unit. That phrase, third-party payments, was the hook. I was sitting in a Panera Bread, charging my laptop, when Evelyn forwarded me his response. It wasn't a letter. It was a frantic email sent at 6:30 in the morning. "Ms. Price," the email read, "I believe there has been a misunderstanding. The termination was mutual. However, upon reviewing the statutes you cited regarding notice periods, I am willing to rectify any procedural oversight. I am refunding Ms. Bennett's full security deposit immediately. Also, regarding the other matter, I was under the impression that the payment from her sister was a family-approved assistance to facilitate her moving costs." He was backtracking so fast he was leaving skid marks. He knew that accepting money from a non-tenant to evict a tenant was a legal minefield. If I sued him for wrongful eviction, the damages could be triple the rent, plus legal fees. He was a small-time landlord. He couldn't afford a lawsuit. Evelyn called me 10 minutes later. "He is scared," she said, her voice sounding satisfied. "He wants to settle this before it becomes a court case. I told him we might be amenable to a settlement, provided he cooperates with our fact-finding." "What kind of fact-finding?" I asked. "I asked for the receipts." Evelyn said, "I told him that if he wants to prove he wasn't conspiring to render you homeless, he needs to show us exactly what your sister told him. If he was misled by her, he needs to prove it." 2 hours later, an attachment landed in my inbox. Mr. Henderson had thrown Kelsey under the bus to save his own skin. He had forwarded screenshots of his text conversation with her, along with a PDF receipt of the Zelle transfer. I opened the file. The timestamp was from the Tuesday I lost my job. Kelsey. "Hey, Mr. Henderson, my sister Reagan is in a bad spot. She lost her job and is spiraling. My parents and I think she needs a hard reset. If we can get her out of that apartment like yesterday, it would force her to come home and get her life together. Would $1,000 cover the hassle of breaking the lease early? Consider it a convenience fee from the family. Henderson, I can't just kick her out if she hasn't missed rent. Kelsey, just tell her the owner needs the unit back. She is a pushover. She won't fight it. Plus, if she stays, she is just going to default anyway. We are trying to save you the headache. This is tough love. Here is the transfer. System notification, Kelsey Bennett sent $1,000. Memo project. Wake-up call. I stared at the words, Project Wake-up Call. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. She had named it. She had pitched it. She had called me a pushover to a stranger. This was the smoking gun. This proved that Kelsey hadn't just helped the landlord. She had actively solicited the eviction. She had manipulated him with lies about my financial state to get me thrown out. I saved the file. I backed it up to 3 different cloud accounts. This changes things. Evelyn said when I told her, this is evidence of malicious intent. We can use this. If she tries to claim she was acting in your best interest, this text chain destroys that defense. She is a pushover is not the language of a concerned sister. It is the language of a bully. And the best part, mister, Henderson wired my security deposit back $1,200 plus the prorated rent for the days I hadn't used. Nearly $2,000 hit my bank account that afternoon. I wasn't rich, but I was no longer destitute. I could buy gas. I could buy food. I could even get a cheap motel room if I wanted. But I didn't. I stayed in the car. I needed to stay angry. Comfort would make me soft. And I wasn't done yet. Meanwhile, the silence from my family had broken, but not in the way I expected. They had stopped calling me. Instead, they had started a PR campaign. My cousin, a girl I had babysat for years, sent me a screenshot from Facebook. Kelsey had posted a long emotional status update. Family is so hard sometimes. She wrote, you try to help people. You try to give them the push they need to succeed. And they turn around and attack you. It is heartbreaking when someone you love loses their way and lashes out at the people who support them most. Please pray for my sister. She is going through a mental health crisis after losing her job and is pushing everyone away. We are just heartbroken. Beneath it, my aunts and uncles had commented, stay strong. Kelsey, so sad when people won't accept help. We love you guys. She was painting me as unstable. She was using my unemployment, the very thing that made me vulnerable, as proof that I was crazy. She was preemptively discrediting me so that when the eviction news came out, people would think it was just another erratic move by crazy Reagan. I didn't comment on the post. I didn't post my own status. Instead, I sent the screenshot to Evelyn. Defamation, I asked. Borderline. She replied, but keep it. It shows a pattern of harassment. And Reagan, do not engage. The truth is in the ledger, not on Facebook. I went back to the ledger. I spent the next day at a public library in Macon, halfway between Atlanta and the coast. I was building a dossier. I pulled the tax records for the Tybee house again. I wanted to be absolutely sure of every penny I had paid. I found a discrepancy in 2023. The tax bill had been higher than usual. I dug into the assessment. The county had reassessed the property value because of improvements, specifically, detached dwelling conversion to income-producing rental unit. The county knew it was a rental. My parents had filed permits for the renovation. I pulled the permit application. It was signed by Robert Bennett, owner. He had forged my signature no. He had just checked the box that said owner and signed his own name. The clerk probably didn't check the deed. That was perjury on a government document. I added it to the pile. Then, Evelyn called with another bombshell. Reagan, she said, her voice serious. My forensic accountant found something else. We were looking at the transfers from the rental income. Trying to trace where the money went, we found a recurring transfer from your father's account to a P.O. box in Florida. Florida, I asked. We don't know anyone in Florida. It is a payment to a company called Sunshine Timeshare Holdings, Evelyn said. It looks like your parents bought a timeshare in Boca Raton 2 years ago. I laughed. A timeshare, of course, but here's the catch. Evelyn continued. To qualify for the financing on the timeshare, they had to list their assets. We subpoenaed the application. Let me guess. I said, "They listed the Tybee house." "They listed the Tybee house," Evelyn confirmed. "But they also listed the rental income from the guest cottage as retirement annuity. And, Reagan, they listed you as a dependent." My blood ran cold. A dependent. "They claimed you were an adult dependent living in the home," Evelyn said, "to increase their household size and qualify for a different tax bracket on the application. They used your social security number." I sat there, stunned. They hadn't just stolen my house. They hadn't just stolen the rent. They had stolen my identity. They had reduced me to a dependent on a piece of paper to buy a timeshare in Florida while I was paying their property taxes. "This is identity theft." I said, "Yes," Evelyn said, "it is, and it is federal. If we turn this over to the authorities, your father isn't just looking at eviction, he is looking at prison time." The weight of that sentence hung in the air. Prison, my father, the man who taught me how to ride a bike, the man who walked me down the aisle at my imaginary weddings when I was a little girl. "Do we use it?" I asked. "That is up to you," Evelyn said. "But it is the nuclear option. Once we ring that bell, we can't unring it. However, we can use it as leverage. We can tell them we know about it. That might be enough to get them to surrender without a fight." "Draft the letter." I said, "Tell them we know about the timeshare. Tell them we know about the social security number. Tell them if they don't vacate the house and hand over the rental profits within 48 hours. We file the police report." "Are you sure?" Evelyn asked. I looked at the screenshot of Kelsey's Facebook post. "Please pray for my sister." "I am sure," I said. I hung up and looked at my reflection in the library window. I looked tired. My hair was pulled back in a severe bun. My eyes were hard. I wasn't the girl who brought soup to her sick grandfather anymore. I wasn't the girl who let her sister borrow her car. I was the girl who had been pushed too far. And I was holding a match. I packed up my laptop. I had one more stop to make before I headed to Tybee Island for the final showdown. I drove to the bank, my bank, with the returned security deposit. I had enough to open a new, secure account. I transferred everything. I changed every password. I set up two-factor authentication. I was locking the doors. As I walked out of the bank, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the Airbnb app. I had set up an alert for the Tybee property. New booking inquiry for the Sea Glass Cottage. I smiled. I logged into the app using the password I still had. I went to the calendar. I blocked every single date for the next year. Then I went to the settings. I changed the payout method. I entered my new bank account information, if they wanted to rent out my house. Fine, but the rent was coming to me now. I waited for the inevitable explosion. It took about 20 minutes. My father called, then my mother, then Kelsey. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. I didn't answer. I just drove. I was heading south, toward the ocean, toward the house that was mine, toward the reckoning that was long overdue. The road stretched out before me, and for the first time in a week, I didn't feel like I was running away. I felt like I was going home. The drive to Tybee Island usually felt like an exhale. For years, crossing the Lazaretto Creek Bridge, where the smell of marsh mud and salt water hit you all at once, was the signal that I could stop clenching my jaw. It was the signal that I was entering the sanctuary of my grandfather, the one place where I had felt safe, today. However, the bridge felt like a plank I was walking toward a riot. It had been 60 hours since Evelyn sent the ultimatum about the identity theft and the timeshare fraud. We had given them a choice: vacate immediately and cooperate with the forensic accounting. Or we hand the file over to the district attorney. They hadn't replied with words. They had replied with the notification that a moving truck had been rented in my father's name. I turned onto Ocean View Lane just as the sun was beginning to bleach the sky a harsh, unforgiving white. The humidity was oppressive, hanging over the island like a wet wool blanket. I saw the house before I saw the people, the sandpiper, my house. A 20-foot U-Haul truck was parked crookedly in the driveway, two of its wheels crushing the hydrangeas I had paid a landscaper $120 a month to maintain. The front door was wide open. From the street, The house looked like it was vomiting its contents onto the lawn. Cardboard boxes were stacked precariously on the porch. A lamp with a broken shade lay on its side in the grass. It looked less like a move and more like an evacuation before a hurricane. I parked my Civic across the street. Careful not to block the truck, I wanted a clear exit route. I took a deep breath, checked that my phone was recording audio per Evelyn's instruction, and stepped out into the heat. The first person I saw was my mother. She was coming out the front door carrying a stack of linens. She looked 10 years older than she had in the photos from the group chat. Her hair was pulled back in a messy clip, and her face was puffy, devoid of makeup. She stopped when she saw me. She didn't drop the linens, but she clutched them tighter, as if I might try to snatch the towels from her hands. "You came," she said. Her voice was flat, raspy. "I told you I would be here for the walkthrough," I said, walking up the driveway. She let out a short, bitter laugh. "The walkthrough. Is that what we are calling it?" "I call it an execution." I walked past her, up the steps to the porch. The wood creaked under my feet, a sound I knew by heart. Inside, the house was a skeleton. The paintings were gone from the walls, leaving pale rectangular ghosts on the yellow paint. The rugs were rolled up. The furniture, some of it mine, some of it theirs, was in chaotic disarray. My father was in the living room, taping up a box with aggressive, violent motions. Rip, stick, smooth. He looked up. His eyes were bloodshot. He didn't look at me with the anger he had on the phone a few days ago. He looked at me with something worse: resentment. Deep, curdled resentment. "I hope you're happy, Reagan," he said, not stopping his taping. "You picked the perfect time, the absolute worst possible time to destroy us." I stood in the doorway, my hands in my pockets to hide the fact that I was clenching my fists. There is never a good time to find out your parents stole your identity. "Dad," I said. He slammed the tape gun down on the table. "We didn't steal anything. We used family resources. That is what families do. We pool resources." "You pooled my resources," I corrected. "You didn't ask. You took, and look at you now," he sneered, gesturing around the room. "The big land baron, throwing your parents out on the street. Do you feel powerful?" "Reagan, is that what this is about? You were always jealous that we gave Kelsey more attention. So now you are punishing us." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had taught me to tie my shoes. The man who I used to think could fix anything. "You gave me 48 hours. Dad," I said quietly. "You and Kelsey gave me 2 days. I gave you 60 days legal notice, and then I gave you the option to leave voluntarily to avoid jail time for fraud. I think I have been incredibly generous." "Generous?" he scoffed, turning his back to me. I walked through the living room and toward the kitchen. The house felt cold, despite the heat outside. It had been stripped of its soul. It wasn't a home anymore. It was just a structure I owned. I heard a crash from the back of the house. I walked down the hallway toward the bedrooms. Kelsey was in the guest room, the one she usually stayed in. She was throwing clothes into a duffel bag with frantic, jerky movements. She looked terrible. Her skin was pale, and she had dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. "Reagan," she yelped when she saw me. She dropped a sweater. I didn't say anything. I just leaned against the doorframe. My interest rate just jumped to 12%. She blurted out. She didn't say hello. She didn't say sorry. She went straight to her own catastrophe. "The bank called me this morning. They are doing a comprehensive review of my file because of the guarantor dispute. They said my debt-to-income ratio is skewed because of the car lease. They might revoke my credit card." "Reagan, my travel card. I have 40,000 points on that card." I looked at her. It was almost impressive how self-absorbed she was. The world was burning down around her, and she was worried about airline miles. "That sounds stressful." I said, "Stressful." She laughed. A high-pitched, hysterical sound. "It is a nightmare, and it is all your fault. If you had just taken the $1,000 and moved on, none of this would have happened. Why did you have to go digging? Why did you have to get a lawyer? Because I got tired of sleeping in a Honda Civic." "Kelsey," I said. She rolled her eyes. "Oh my God. Stop being so dramatic. You slept in a car for, 3 nights." People do that for fun on road trips. I stared at her. There was no getting through to her. She lived in a reality where she was the protagonist and everyone else was a supporting character designed to facilitate her comfort. I am not here to argue with you. I said, I am here to make sure you don't take anything that belongs to the estate. That includes the antique dresser in the corner. Grandpa left that to the house, not to you. She glared at the dresser. I hate that old thing anyway. It smells like mothballs. I turned and walked away. I couldn't be near her. The air around her felt toxic. I found myself walking toward the back of the house, toward my father's study. This was the room where he managed his investments. It was the room I had been forbidden to enter as a child because important business was happening. The door was open. The desk was covered in papers. He was hurriedly shredding documents. The whir of the shredder was the soundtrack of his panic. I walked in. He froze, his hand hovering over the machine. What are you doing? I asked. Cleaning up, he said defensively. Personal papers. None of your business. He grabbed a stack of files and tried to shove them into a box, but in his haste, a folder slipped. Papers fanned out across the floor. I stepped forward before he could grab them. Don't touch those, he shouted. I crouched down. My eyes landed on a printed spreadsheet. It wasn't a tax document. It was a projection. The header read, Home Equity Line of Credit. Valuation Strategy. I picked it up. Below it was another sheet. Bennett Ventures. Cash Flow Analysis. I scanned the rows. I saw the entry for guest unit revenue. It was listed as a primary income source for the business. But next to it, there was a column I hadn't seen before. Projected mortgage draw. I looked closer. The numbers were specific. $200,000. I looked up at my father. He was standing there, pale and sweating. You weren't just taking a small business loan. I said, my voice was trembling. You were planning to strip the equity. You were going to take $200,000 out of the house value. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. The paper was in my hand. I needed liquidity, he shouted, his facade finally cracking. The consulting business has been dead for 2 years, Reagan said. I have been moving money from one credit card to another just to keep the lights on. I needed a bridge loan. The house is sitting here, sitting on a gold mine of equity, and you were just letting it rot. So you were going to mortgage my house, I asked. Without telling me I was going to pay it back, he insisted. Once the new venture took off. What new venture? Dad. The timeshare in Boca. Or the luxury car for Kelsey. It was an investment, he yelled. You don't understand business. Reagan, you have a poverty mindset. You sit on assets instead of leveraging them. I was trying to build something for the family. For which family, I asked, because I certainly wasn't included in the profits. I was just the insurance policy. He slumped into his chair. He looked small. The bluster was gone, replaced by the pathetic reality of a man who had gambled everything on a lie and lost. We raised you, he whispered. We gave you everything, and you begrudge us a little help when we are drowning. I looked at the spreadsheet in my hand. Projected mortgage draw $200,000. That isn't help. Dad, I said, that is theft. You were going to steal $200,000 of equity from the only thing Grandpa left me. You were going to risk foreclosure on my home to fund your delusions of being a tycoon. He put his head in his hands. I placed the paper back on the desk. I didn't shred it. I took a photo of it. My lawyer will need this, I said. He looked up, tears streaming down his face. Reagan, please, don't do this. I am an old man. If you pursue this fraud charge, I can't go to jail. Please, I am begging you. I looked at his tears. 10 years ago, they would have broken me. 5 days ago, they would have made me pause. But today, I remembered the sound of the security guard's car in the grocery store parking lot. I remembered the taste of the cheap coffee I bought to rent a chair. I remembered the silence of my phone when I was sleeping on the street. Lawyers work with paper. Dad, I said, my voice was as cold as the ocean in winter. They don't work with tears, and neither do I. Not anymore. I turned to leave the room. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Evelyn. I answered it. putting it on speaker so he could hear. "Reagan," Evelyn said. Her voice was sharp. "I just got a call from the county clerk's office regarding the permit file we pulled." "Yes," I said. Watching my father, "They have the original application on file," Evelyn said. "The one for the conversion of the guest unit." "Reagan, the signature on the affidavit of ownership isn't just your father signing his name as owner. It is a signature that reads, Reagan Bennett." I froze. "Someone forged your signature, Reagan," Evelyn said clearly. "That is second-degree forgery. That is a felony. We aren't just looking at fraud anymore. We are looking at a criminal act of forgery." I looked at my father. His face had gone gray. He stopped crying. He looked like a ghost. "I didn't sign that." I whispered to Evelyn. "I know," she said. "The handwriting analysis is already underway. It matches the handwriting on the checks from your father's business account." I hung up the phone. The silence in the room was absolute. The shredder sat silent. The moving boxes stood like witnesses. "You signed my name," I said. He didn't answer. He couldn't. I turned around and walked out of the office. I walked down the hallway, past Kelsey, who was dragging her duffel bag toward the door, past my mother, who was standing in the kitchen holding a vase and weeping softly. I walked out onto the porch. The heat hit me again. But I didn't feel it. I felt a strange, vibrating clarity. I had come here worried about them stealing the furniture. I realized now that was the least of my problems. They had tried to steal my name. I walked down the steps to my car. I needed to send the recording to Evelyn. I needed to authorize her to escalate. There was no going back now. The bridge behind me wasn't just burned. It was detonated. And as I looked at the U-Haul truck, I realized that I wasn't the one being evicted anymore. I was the one holding the keys. And for the first time, I was going to change the locks. The humidity on Tybee Island does not just make you sweat. It makes you feel like you are moving through warm syrup. But as I stood on the porch of the house that legally belonged to me, watching my family implode, the air felt brittle. It felt like one wrong word would shatter the sky like a pane of glass. My father had retreated back into his office, presumably to panic in private after I caught him with the equity stripping projections. But silence is not a weapon my sister knows how to use. She prefers noise. She prefers chaos. Kelsey stormed out onto the porch. Her phone clutched in her hand like a grenade. She wasn't dragging her duffel bag anymore. She was filming. "Say hello to the family. Reagan," she shouted, shoving the camera lens into my face. "I am just going live to tell everyone how you are kicking your elderly parents out of their home because you are bitter about getting fired." I didn't flinch. I didn't slap the phone away. I looked directly into the camera lens with the dead-eyed exhaustion of someone who has slept in a Honda Civic for 3 nights. "You can film all you want. Kelsey," I said, my voice steady, "but make sure you tell them about the $1,000 you paid Mr. Henderson, and make sure you tell them about the $200,000 in equity Dad was trying to drain from the property title." She cut the feed instantly. Her face went from performance indignation to genuine, venomous rage. "You are a monster," she hissed. "Do you know what I can do? I have 5,000 followers on Instagram. I have the entire extended family on Facebook. I can ruin you. Reagan, I can paint you as the unstable, ungrateful, mentally ill daughter who lost her mind. Who is going to hire you then?" I looked at her. It was a valid threat. In the court of public opinion, the loudest voice usually wins. And Kelsey had been loud her entire life. "Go ahead," I said. "But remember, defamation is actionable if it is false. And I have the receipts. I have the bank statements. I have the text messages. So if you want to make this public, let us make it public. But be prepared for the discovery phase of the lawsuit." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. She wasn't used to me fighting back. She was used to Reagan the doormat, Reagan the fixer, Reagan the shock absorber. She didn't know how to handle Reagan the plaintiff. Just then, the screen door creaked open. My mother stepped out. She wasn't carrying linens this time. She was carrying a photo album. Of course, the emotional artillery. She sat down on the porch swing, the swing I had re-stained myself 2 summers ago, and patted the cushion next to her. "Come sit, Reagan," she said softly. I stayed standing by the railing. "I found this in the attic," she said, opening the book. "Look, here's your 4th birthday. Do you remember? We bought you that big pink bicycle with the streamers. It cost a fortune, but your father insisted. He said his little princess deserved the best." I looked at the faded photograph. I did remember the bike. I also remembered that they sold it 6 months later at a yard sale because they needed cash for a vacation I wasn't invited to. And here, she turned the page. "Your high school graduation. We paid for that party. Reagan, we paid for the dress. We paid for the catering. We have always taken care of you. How can you wipe all that away? How can you look at these memories and call a lawyer?" I gripped the railing. The wood was rough under my palm. This was their tactic. They viewed raising me not as a parental obligation, but as a series of loans. Every meal, every pair of shoes, every birthday party was a deposit in a ledger they were now trying to cash out. "You fed me because you were my parents." "Mom," I said, "you didn't buy a permit to defraud me later. Buying me a bike when I was 4 does not give you the right to forge my signature on a loan application when I'm 30. She slammed the album shut. Dust motes danced in the heavy afternoon light. "We didn't forge anything," she cried, her voice cracking. "It was a misunderstanding. Your father he got confused with the paperwork. He is getting older, Reagan. His memory isn't what it used to be. He didn't seem confused when he was calculating the $200,000 draw." I said, "He seemed very specific about the math." She started to weep again, burying her face in her hands. "It is all falling apart," she sobbed. "The club membership, the status, where will we go? We can't go back to a condo in the suburbs. It would kill your father. The shame will kill him." I looked at her, weeping for her social standing while I stood there in wrinkled clothes, smelling like stale car upholstery. "You should have thought about that before you treated my house like an ATM." I said. My phone buzzed. It was an email from Evelyn. The subject line was "Urgent Handwriting Analysis." I opened it. "Reagan, the preliminary review is back. The signature on the permit application is a 99% match for Kelsey's handwriting style, not your father's. We compared it to the note she wrote on the check to the landlord. It has the same loop on the R." I froze. I looked up at Kelsey. She was leaning against the house siding, typing furiously on her phone, probably trying to spin the narrative to Aunt Martha. I walked over to her. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I held the phone up so she could see the email. "It wasn't Dad," I said. Kelsey looked at the screen. Her eyes widened. She stopped typing. "It wasn't Dad who forged the signature on the permit." I said, "It was you." She recoiled, as if I had slapped her. I was just practicing," she stammered. "Practicing a felony?" I asked. "No. Listen to me." She looked around wildly, checking to see if our parents were listening. "They asked me to do it. Dad's hand shakes too much. He told me to sign it for him. He said it was just a formality. He said you wouldn't mind because we are family." "So you admit it?" I asked. "You admit you signed my name on a legal document to convert my property into a rental unit. I didn't authorize." "It was their idea," she shouted, her voice shrill with panic. "They made me do it. They said if we didn't get the rental income, they couldn't pay for my car lease. They said we needed the money to keep up appearances. I was just trying to help the family." "Reagan, why is everything always on me?" I stepped back. The picture was complete. It wasn't just a father trying to save his business. It was a conspiracy. My sister wanted her car. My parents wanted their country club lifestyle. And they had all agreed, collectively, that my credit, my property, and my name were the raw materials they would burn to keep their fire going. And when I became inconvenient, when I lost my job and needed the house back, they didn't just say no. They tried to erase me. I looked at Kelsey. She was trembling. She wasn't the arrogant influencer anymore. She was a scared child who had been caught playing with matches. But I wasn't her mother. I wasn't her keeper. I was her victim. I held up my phone. Evelyn just heard all of that. I said. Kelsey's face went white. You are recording everything. I said. Since I stepped out of the car, she lunged for the phone. I stepped back quickly. Don't, I warned. Assault will just add to the list. Kelsey. And right now, the list is long enough to send you away for 5 years. She stopped. She slumped against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the dirty porch floor. She put her head in her knees. I hate you. She muffled into her jeans. I hate you so much. I know, I said, because I stopped letting you use me. I walked back to the center of the porch. My mother was staring at Kelsey in horror. My father had come back to the doorway, drawn by the shouting. He looked from Kelsey to me, realizing that his youngest daughter had just thrown him under the bus to save herself. Here is how this is going to end, I said. My voice was loud enough for the neighbors to hear. And I didn't care. I am leaving now. You have exactly 48 hours. By Friday at noon. I want this house empty. I want the keys on the kitchen counter. I want the ledger for the rental income on the table. And I want proof that every single credit application using my name has been withdrawn. We can't move that fast, my father protested. We have nowhere to go. You have a timeshare in Florida. I said, go there. But that is just a studio, my mother wailed. Then you better get used to close quarters, I said, because the alternative is a jail cell. I turned to walk down the stairs. Reagan, please, my mother called out. Just give us a month. We will pay you rent. We will pay you back. I stopped on the bottom step. I turned around. You had 4 years to pay me back, I said. You had 4 years to say thank you. You had 4 years to treat me like a daughter instead of a bank account. I didn't wait for their answer. I walked to my car. As I opened the door, Mrs. Gable, the neighbor my mother was so afraid of, was standing by her mailbox. She was pretending to check her mail, but she was watching intently. She caught my eye. She didn't look judgmental. She looked sympathetic. She walked over to the edge of the driveway. Reagan, she whispered. Yes, Mrs. Gable. I saw your sister, she said, keeping her voice low. Last week, she was carrying a box of files out to a silver car. A man in a suit was with her. They were laughing. I heard her say something about easy equity. I didn't know what it meant then. But I think you should know. Thank you, Mrs. Gable. I said. She nodded. You were always the good one, she said. The quiet one. I am glad you are finally making some noise. I got into my car. My hands were shaking again, but this time it was from the adrenaline of the release. I had said it. I had done it. I had stripped the bark off the family tree and shown the rot underneath. I drove to a motel on the mainland, a cheap one, but one with a bed and a door that locked. I paid with the money Mr. Henderson had returned to me. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my laptop. I had an email notification. It wasn't from Evelyn. It wasn't from my family. It was from North Harbor Support Labs. Dear Reagan, we were impressed by your application and your background in crisis management. We would like to interview you for the Senior Customer Success Manager position. This is a fully remote role with full benefits. Are you available tomorrow at 10? I stared at the screen. Crisis management. The irony was thick enough to choke on. I typed back immediately. I am available. I lay back on the motel bed. The ceiling had a water stain shaped like a cloud. I closed my eyes. For the first time in a week, I wasn't just reacting. I wasn't just surviving. I had a job interview. I had a lawyer. I had a house that would be empty in 48 hours. My phone buzzed one last time. It was Evelyn. I drafted the final settlement agreement. They surrender the house. They sign a confession of judgment for the stolen rent in exchange for us not pressing criminal charges immediately. And they agree to a permanent restraining order. We dropped the hammer on Friday at noon. Be ready. I texted back, I am ready. I rolled over and turned off the lamp. The darkness didn't feel scary tonight. It felt like a blank page. And on Friday at noon, I was going to start writing the rest of the story. Friday at noon arrived not with a bang, but with the ominous, calculated silence of a courtroom before the gavel falls. The humidity had broken, leaving the air over Tybee Island crisp and sharp. the kind of weather that offers no place to hide. I did not go to the house alone. I pulled into the driveway in my Honda Civic, but I was flanked by a black sedan that looked like it belonged in a motorcade. Evelyn Price stepped out of the driver's seat. She was wearing a navy blue suit that absorbed the light, carrying a leather briefcase that contained the dismantling of my parents' delusions. Behind her, a hulking man named Marcus, a process server who doubled as security, stood quietly by the bumper, his arms folded. We walked up the stairs. The U-Haul was fully packed now. Its rear door slammed shut and locked. The house looked hollowed out. My father opened the door before we could knock. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 2 days. His polo shirt was wrinkled, and the arrogance that usually defined his posture was gone, replaced by a slump of defeat. "Come in," he said, his voice a rasp. We sat at the dining room table, the only piece of furniture left in the main room. My mother sat with her hands gripping a travel mug so tight her knuckles were white. Kelsey stood in the corner, refusing to sit, her arms crossed over her chest. Staring at the floor, Evelyn didn't waste time with pleasantries. She opened her briefcase and laid 3 stacks of documents on the mahogany surface. The sound of the paper hitting the wood echoed in the empty house. "Here is the situation," Evelyn began, her voice cool and professional. "We have drafted a confession of judgment. It is a legal document in which you admit to the debt owed to Reagan Bennett for the misappropriated rental income from the guest cottage over the last 36 months. The forensic accounting places this total, including interest and penalties, at $52,000. My mother let out a small, strangled sob. $52,000. We don't have that kind of liquid cash. We spent it on the timeshare. We spent it on the club dues. Evelyn didn't blink. Then you will liquidate assets. You will sell the timeshare. You will sell the boat. You will liquidate the jewelry. We don't care how you find the money, Linda, but you will find it, because the alternative is option B. She slid a second file forward. Option B is that we take the findings regarding the forged signature on the permit application and the fraudulent credit application for the business loan, and we walk them over to the Chatham County District Attorney's office. My father flinched. He looked at Kelsey. Kelsey looked at the wall. Forgery is a felony. Robert, Evelyn continued. Identity theft is a felony. Bank fraud is a felony. If we file this, you aren't just losing a house, you are losing your freedom. And Kelsey, since your handwriting matches the signature, you would be named as a co-conspirator. Kelsey's head snapped up. I told you. I was just doing what they told me. It doesn't matter, Evelyn said. You signed the paper. You committed the crime. The room fell silent. I looked at them. I looked at the people who were supposed to be my safety net. They were terrified, not because they had hurt me, but because they had been caught. They were mourning their reputation, not their relationship with their daughter. We will sign, my father whispered. He reached for the pen. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He signed the confession of judgment. Then he signed the surrender of possession. Then he signed the agreement to a permanent restraining order. My mother signed next, tears dripping onto the paper. Then it was Kelsey's turn. She walked to the table, snatched the pen, and scrawled her name. She threw the pen down. Are we done? She snapped. Can we leave now? Not quite, Evelyn said. She pulled out one last piece of paper. It was a printout of a screenshot. It was the text message Kelsey had sent to Mr. Henderson, Project Wake Up Call. I want you to look at this. Evelyn said to my parents, I want you to look at exactly what your daughter did. She didn't just help a landlord. She paid a bribe to ensure Reagan was thrown onto the street without due process. This is the receipt for the $1,000. My mother looked at the paper. She looked at the words. She is a pushover. You knew my mother asked Kelsey, her voice trembling. You told us the landlord was kicking her out because of the layoff. You told us you just facilitated it. You didn't tell us you paid him to do it. Kelsey's face turned red. Does it matter? We wanted her out. We wanted her to come home so we could fix things. So you could use her credit, I interrupted. So you could have a co-signer for the next loan that isn't fixing things. Kelsey, that is entrapping someone. My father looked at the receipt. He looked at the $1,000 transfer. For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine shame in his eyes. Not for me, but for the sheer pettiness of the act. He realized then that his tough love narrative was a lie. He hadn't been teaching me a lesson. He had been an accessory to a malicious eviction. "We are leaving," my father said. Standing up, he sounded exhausted. Evelyn nodded. "You have 1 hour to clear the property. Anything left behind becomes the property of the estate." They moved like ghosts. They carried the last few boxes to the truck. I stood on the porch and watched them. It was a reversal of the scene from a week ago. Then, I had been the one shoving my life into trash bags, terrified and confused. Now, they were the ones retreating, stripping their identity from the walls of a house they never truly owned. My mother stopped at the bottom of the stairs. She looked back at me. "We just wanted the best for you." She lied. It is a lie people tell themselves so they can sleep at night. I didn't answer. I didn't owe her absolution. Kelsey was the last one to leave. She paused by the driver's side of her Audi, the car that was now under investigation by the bank. She looked at me with pure, distilled hatred. "You think you won," she spat. "You think you are so smart with your lawyer and your paperwork, but you are going to be alone. Reagan, you have no family now, no one, and one day, you are going to need us. You are going to get sick, or you are going to fall down, and you will have no one to call." I looked at her. I looked at the sister who had turned my vulnerability into a weapon. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, but it was a genuine one. "Kelsey," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I did need you. I needed you last Tuesday. I lost my job, and I was scared, and I needed my family. And you paid a stranger $1,000 to prove that I wasn't worth a roof over my head." She froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "I would rather be alone in a house I own," I continued, "than be surrounded by people who sell me out for spare change. Drive safe. Kelsey, I hear the repo man works on weekends." She slammed the car door. She peeled out of the driveway, gravel spraying against the hydrangeas. The U-Haul followed, lumbering down the street like a white elephant. I watched them turn the corner and disappear. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 4 years. Evelyn stepped up beside me. She handed me a set of keys. "I had the locks changed this morning while you were parking," she said. "These are the new ones, the only ones." "Thank you, Evelyn," I said, "for everything." She smiled. It was a rare, warm expression. "You did the work. Reagan, I just provided the paper. You stood up. That is the hard part." She walked to her car. "I will be in touch regarding the asset liquidation. Enjoy your house. Ms. Bennett." I walked back inside. The house was quiet. It smelled of lemon polish and sea salt. It was empty, but it didn't feel lonely. It felt clean. I walked into the kitchen. I opened my laptop. I had an email waiting for me. It was from the hiring manager at North Harbor Support Labs. "Reagan, we would like to offer you the position. Your interview this morning was excellent. We were particularly impressed by your composure under pressure. The starting salary is $85,000 a year, with a signing bonus. Can you start on Monday?" I hit reply. "I accept." I closed the laptop. $85,000. Plus the $52,000 Evelyn was going to wring out of my parents' assets. Plus the rental income from the guest cottage, which I would now manage myself legally, honestly, and profitably. I wasn't just back on my feet. I was standing on a foundation of solid rock. I spent the rest of the afternoon walking through the rooms. I opened the windows to let the ocean breeze blow out the stagnant air of my parents' tenure. I visualized where I would put my own furniture. I visualized a library in the office where my father had plotted his fraud. I visualized a garden in the back where Kelsey had taken her selfies. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in streaks of violet and gold, I walked out onto the porch. I sat on the swing. I kicked off my shoes. I thought about the girl who had slept in the grocery store parking lot. I thought about the fear, the cold, the absolute desolation of believing she was unloved. I wasn't unloved. I was just loved by people who didn't know the definition of the word. I looked out at the dunes. The ocean roared in the distance. A constant, powerful rhythm. Revenge. I realized, wasn't about hurting them. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't slashed their tires. I hadn't stooped to their level. Revenge was simply taking back what was mine. It was removing the parasite so the host could live. It was drawing a line in the sand and saying, "No more." I took a sip of the iced tea I had made. It was cold and sweet. I was 30 years old. I was a homeowner. I was employed. And for the first time in my life, I was free. I watched the first star appear in the twilight sky. It was bright and unwavering. They had tried to teach me a lesson about the real world. They had tried to teach me about tough love. Well, I had learned. I learned that the only person who will save you is yourself. I learned that silence is expensive, but freedom is priceless. And I learned that sometimes, the best way to win the game is to be the one holding the deed. I closed my eyes and listened to the ocean. It sounded like applause. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Lily Revenge Stories. It has been a wild ride, and I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from your car, your kitchen, or maybe your own front porch? Let me know in the comments below because I love reading your thoughts. If you enjoyed seeing justice served cold, please hit that subscribe button, like this video, and smash the hype button to help this story get recommended to more people who need a reminder to stand up for themselves.